Welfare groups are calling for an end to the controversial practice of using caravan parks and motels as emergency accommodation for children at risk. For decades, social worker Bob Lonne has witnessed the damage caused by dumping vulnerable children in temporary accommodation.
Bob believes the system is having a direct impact on Australia's youth homelessness, with statistics showing a record 36,000 children sleeping on the streets every night. Bob joins us this morning to explain why the system is failing those who need it most. Good morning, Bob.
Morning, Bob.
Oh, hi, David, Kim.
It seems extraordinary in Australia, doesn't it? A country like Australia, that we have those kinds of statistics. How dire is it? I mean, how dire is the lack of emergency housing?
The emergency housing, as the federal government sort of pointed out over the last wee while, is growing, and it's a major problem, and I think a quite significant factor in a range of issues that are impacting young people today. We could go on to look at education and unemployment as well. But for some, and the numbers are growing, it's actually down to the basics of where they're going to sleep at night.
These children are typically in a position that's dangerous or unhealthy for them.
Yes.
So they're then removed by the department, is that correct?
Obviously not all of them come into contact with the child protection authorities, but for those who do, there are a range of ways that they come to the attention. Some obviously when they're quite young. Others come into contact with the departments when they get older. And for those older ones, and we're talking the sort of the 10 and upward, quite often it's a reason, or the reason for the initial contact is about emotional abuse or physical abuse, which are often...
In the home?
In the home, yeah. Which are often the signs of a family under significant stress.
So typically, where do they end up? Where should they end up? These children that are taken in by the department.
Well, when departments intervene, they initially try to make an assessment, get an idea about what exactly is going on, and if a determination is made that the situation is serious enough to warrant the removal of a child, then decisions are made about where's the best place for the child. In most cases, and in most states, the first preference is with kin, so grandparents or aunts or uncles, and I think all of us would agree that's a much better placement. But there are just under 50% of the placements. The remaining 55% of placements, 50% of those, of that 50% of the 100% go to foster placements, and about 5% go to residential care, which can be a range of independent living, etc. The difficulty here is that we're not talking about children who are unscathed. Quite often these children have gone through really major traumas in their lives. Their relationships have been fractured. They're not very happy. They suffer mental illness on occasions, for example depression. They can be self-damaging, self-harming, and their behaviour is often characterised by a lot of outbursts of anger.
So the kids who don't go into foster care and don't go with relatives, they can end up in hotels and caravan parks.
Well, that's one of the great difficulties for departments. If there are no kin that are willing or available, then you need to go to foster placements. If there are no foster placements, and I'd like to talk about the difficulties there, then the options start to wind back. And sadly, in a number of states, not all states, but a number of states, the options that have been taken as an emergency placement have been hotels, motels and caravan parks.
All right. That just makes me shudder.
Yes, it makes me shudder too, but to explain what's so terribly wrong with that.
Well, there are a few things wrong with it. First of all, if you look at the needs of the children, sitting in a hotel room or a caravan for hours on end, albeit with a 24-hour carer close, is not a great lifestyle. And in fact, what we've had in the media is some glaring examples of young people sitting around, playing games all day, unemployed, not attending school. And I'm one of those who are arguing that if we remove children supposedly in their best interests, then how can we possibly conclude that that sort of lifestyle or that sort of outcome is in their best interest?
What is the answer then? I mean, if there is nowhere else to put them and they're in danger at home, what do we do?
I think there are at least two clear different responses. The first is that a lot more has to be done in the first place in helping families address the issues that are at hand. And some families have quite significant problems. There, as I said, there are mental health, there's drug and alcohol abuse, There can be other trauma and relationship problems. We're not talking about small problems here, we're talking about major problems.
So you're talking counselling and support for those families going
Absolutely.
through those dramas.
And that support being accessible and available. And there are many communities, particularly rural and remote ones, where that isn't the case. So a lot more can be done there to actually keep families intact in the first place. At the other end, we appreciate that there are obviously some situations where children do need to be removed, and any reasonable person would conclude that. But the difficulty is that we've locked ourselves into an approach of alternative care that's basically wrapped around foster care. And we know that particularly for teenagers, that many teenagers find foster care and the intensity in family relationships to be overwhelming. So they then have behavioural problems which lead to foster breakdowns.
Before we talk about this a bit more, I want to ask you one thing further on this. I mean, you said that we need to have these sorts of facilities and programs and areas of treatment for families at risk. We need to have that available. But I'm worried that so many families might be frightened of flagging the fact that they have an issue to authorities for fear of their children being taken away.
You're absolutely right, Kim, and one of the most alarming things that have come out in the last 5 years has been the rapid rise in notifications. What's happened, if you look at the system as a whole, it has gradually moved from one that provides help to people in distress and trauma to one where investigation is the service. And, you know, the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare released statistics showing in the last 10 years the number of notifications and investigations has doubled and now is at 300,000 per year in Australia.